Northridge for the last 10 and a bit years, and you remember Ben when he was the snot-nosed little 7-year-old? Was that not a beautiful moment watching this kid lead us? Yeah, and I know it's announcements, but he pastored us there. That was a beautiful moment. That was awesome. And very well put together and said, I love that kid. And he did a great job. Welcome. Did you know you have been to church every Sunday in 2019? An incredible streak. You know those how the Fitbits will keep track of this, that, and the other thing? We need like a church Fitbit. Your streak is 1. And it's not about just showing up. I really want to, we don't normally point back to sermons we've done in the past, but last week we talked a little bit about the vision that is building for Northridge. And so if you weren't here last week, that's okay. That was 2018. That does not affect your streak. But you can go back. You'll see on your, what do you call those things, bulletins? That there's a URL for our website. Go to our website, look in media, and you'll find last week's message up there. And it's worth revisiting. It's one of the ones that I would love for everybody who calls Northridge home to have seen. So if you're here last week, tick, it's done. But if you weren't here last week, I would encourage you to revisit that, because it's going to start to lay the foundation for some things that are percolating, especially between now and March 3rd, when we have our Vision Sharing Sunday, and then the AGM to follow that. Does that make sense? So lots of good stuff happening there. All right. Today, we are starting a brand new sermon series, and we've called it How to Be Brave. And really, bravery is only a symptom of hope. When we have hope that things are going to go well, that things are going to finish well, it enables us to be more brave. Right? If I went into a fight, and as you can imagine, I wouldn't go in with a whole lot of hope, but if I went into a fight knowing that I was going to win that fight, that will affect my bravery, would it not? I will have a little more swagger, and I'll be a little more confident in myself. And that's the link between hope and bravery. And that's the theme we're going to revisit over and over and over. And what I want to do for this sermon series is I want to treat it almost like a lesson each week. And so today is lesson number 1. And those aren't pills at the bottom, just so you know. Those are pieces of chalk. I was looking at it sort of like, people are going to think like, here's how you really get brave. Okay, so that was like a terrible joke. Lesson number 1. And I'm excited about starting here. Obviously, I'm excited about starting here because that's what I chose to do. But you are never beyond hope. And that is an unqualified never. You are never beyond hope. Normally, when we go through a letter in the New Testament, I tend to gloss over the greeting at the beginning. But this sermon series, we're actually going to start with it, and we're only going to be looking at 2 verses today. And really, honestly, those 2 verses are an excuse for me to introduce you to who Peter was. But let's look at, and again, if you want to follow along, we're going to be doing 1 Peter for the next 8 weeks. So we're going to start verse 1 and 2. Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ. And what that means is he was an eyewitness to the life of Jesus. At SNL, we talk about the author Luke, how he actually didn't know Jesus firsthand. We like to describe him as the Indiana Jones of Bible writers, where he got his information secondhand. He thoroughly researched to compile the story of Jesus. But Peter is an apostle of Jesus Christ. He walked with Jesus. And this is the beginning of a letter, so this is who the letter is to. To those who are elect exiles of the dispersion of Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia, according to the foreknowledge of God the Father and the sanctification of the Spirit, for obedience to Jesus Christ and for sprinkling with his blood, may grace and peace be multiplied to you. So that's a mouthful. And really the greeting, you'll find this at the beginning of the New Testament letters. It is acknowledging who it's being written by and who the audience is. Now this letter, the letter of 1 Peter, was meant to be this circular letter. It was a letter that was meant to be passed on from church to church and to be read in the gatherings of the church. So it wasn't just to one. You see there's a list of different groups that this was intended for. But I don't want to talk so much about the letter as I want to talk about the person. I want to use Peter's own life as a backdrop and ultimate example of how we are never beyond hope. And so I'm just going to walk through his life. This is the life of Peter. Now, most of you will know that Peter did not begin as Peter. Peter was Simon. And we can read about that moment when Simon encounters Jesus, or Jesus calls out Simon. And that's in Luke 5 if you want to look that up. Simon was a fisherman. And you know what's funny? As I was preparing for this week, I started to reevaluate the way I looked at fishing. See, Simon was not just a fisherman, he would have been like a generational Dennis Chernagle type fisherman, where his father, and I don't know if your father's father and so on and so on, but there was this long Norwegian legacy of fishermen. And I've heard the stories of Dennis out in the open waters, and I have no wish or desire ever to follow his footsteps. To me, that sounds like a recipe for throwing up. And but Simon would have been this generational fisherman. This would have been his identity in his village. It would have been what he did generation after. Well, he didn't do it generation after generation, but this is something that was who he was. And I started to think a little bit more about what a fisherman is. Sorry, Dennis, and sorry, Mark, I'm going to use you as an example too. I kind of undersold being a fisherman, where it's just like, for you it would be a net, you throw out the net, you catch fish, you just kind of haul it in, whatever, right? But when you I think of Mark out in the water. Mark's another avid fisherman, different type of fisherman. But first of all, the discipline required to be a fisherman is noteworthy. The fish aren't biting in the perfect middle of the day where it's nice to be out in a boat. Okay, you're up early, and so you're disciplining yourself. Jared Meredith, I haven't seen if you're here today. I know you're on setup or teardown, so you're probably here somewhere. But Jared works early in the morning, and so when he comes to our small group, we know we've got to be done at 9 because he's got to get up the next morning and go to work. There's a discipline that comes to your entire life setting up this role as a fisherman. I know, Mark, you probably tie your own flies. That just sounds like, yeah, there you go. So there's this discipline, this preparation, meticulous preparation. Because if you don't take care of your nets, you're not going to catch a lot of fish. And I think that I've undersold who Simon was as a fisherman. I kind of picture this kind of grunt, massive, bearded, and not against anybody with great beards, but this hairy, dirty, smelly, and he may have been dirty and smelly, I don't know. Man, but probably not super bright. But I started to realize, no, he was probably good at what he did. He learned from his father, he learned from his father. And that ingrainedness makes the next thing all the more amazing. When Jesus comes, he just shows up. He doesn't have a relationship with Jesus, but Jesus shows up. And they have this encounter. At the end of this encounter, Jesus says, you know what? Follow me, and I'm going to make you a fisher of men. I'm going to change your life from being a fisherman to a fisher of men. And amazingly, Peter's drops his net and walks away following Jesus. For the rest of Jesus' life, Simon followed him. And to me, that was amazing, thinking fishing is all he's ever known. This is who he is, who he has always been. All of his comforts and securities, everything that was safe, was in that village and in his role as a fisherman. And he walked away from it completely. Last night at SNL, Scott taught about the cost of following Jesus. And in one of the examples, the person says, yeah, Jesus, I'll follow you. I just need to go home and say goodbye to my family. He says, you know what? No. When you follow, when you put your hand to the plow, you don't look back. He calls us to follow him wholeheartedly. And Simon did that wholeheartedly. His whole heart was in following Jesus. It's an amazing moment in Luke 5. And so from there, Simon becomes the disciple. He sits under Jesus. I like to use the expression that he camped with Jesus for 3 years. And he saw everything that Jesus did. He watched him heal people, raise people from the dead. He listened to his teaching. He watched him do these miraculous things with loaves and fishes, feeding thousands of people. He had a front row seat to all of that as his disciple. And Jesus was very intentional with Simon and the other disciples. His goal, Jesus knew, in fact, he alluded to it throughout these teachings. He knew that there would be a day where Jesus would go and the disciples would be left. And it would be their role to turn around, much like our generational fishermen, they would become generational disciplers. Where their role as disciples of Jesus was going to be to turn around now and become disciplers of people coming up behind him, so that the good news of what Jesus could do can get spread even farther. It was a brilliant strategy. And today, when we are called to disciple people, this is the model. We are meant to have people coming behind us or coming alongside us who we are teaching about Jesus, so that they can teach others about Jesus. It's really our one mission as a church. But anyway, Simon's sitting under Jesus as a disciple. And there's this beautiful moment. Actually, I'll tell you about a different moment. This is a moment in Matthew 14. It gives you a bit of a glimpse of who Simon was. There's this moment where there are these storms, and then all of a sudden they see Jesus coming across the water, over the rocky water, and Simon's like, you know what, I'm going out to see him. I'm going to walk on, he calls him, he says, come walk out here. You can walk on the water with me. And we get a picture of Simon's faith walking on the water. And it starts to give you this picture of who this guy is. This is a man of great faith. He'll walk away from his career. He'll walk on water, and yeah, we see he stumbles, and he falls in the water, and Jesus saves him. It's a beautiful moment. And then we see the next cool part of his life. And this kind of sounds funny. We preached on this a few weeks ago, where Jesus, they're all sitting around the campfire, and Jesus says to the disciples, he's like, you know what? Hey, you guys, what are people saying about me? Who do they say that I am? It's kind of like the pre-internet equivalent of Googling yourself. Like, what are they saying about me? What's the word on the street about me? And we know that Jesus isn't fishing for a compliment or anything like that. But he's setting up the next question. And they're saying, they say you're Elijah, come back from the dead. That you're a great prophet. They've got all these different ideas of what they heard about who Jesus is. And then Jesus asked an incredibly important question. Who do you say that I am? And that's when Simon kind of stands up and says, you're the Son of God. There's this moment of belief and revelation that you truly are God's Son sent. You're the Messiah. You're the one. And that's when Jesus makes a promise. He speaks a promise over Simon. He says, Simon, your name means reed. And we've talked about this here in church before, but a reed is like a thick blade of grass that at the slightest breeze will kind of get blown over and affected. If somebody steps on it, it'll become creased or folded or trampled down. Sorry if your name's Simon. It's kind of a wimpy name. Sorry. But he has this wimpy, it means reed, and somebody's going to fight me one of these days. So I was like, I'm not a wimp. But his name meant this wimpy, flaky reed. He says, Simon, from now on, you're not going to be Simon. I'm changing your name. The Arabic word is Cephas. And that was translated to Greek to be Petros, which becomes Peter in English. And it means rock. He says, from now on, you're not going to be this wimpy little reed. You're going to be a rock. And this is where the promise comes. On this rock, I'm going to build my church. Well, Peter's probably feeling pretty good about himself. You talk about that swagger going into a fight, that confidence that comes when Jesus says that you are now a rock and the church is going to be built on you. That's a cause for confidence. Interestingly enough, I hadn't really thought about this before, is the idea of church had not been invented yet. The church was formed, the church was literally built later on in the story. We'll get to that later on. So Peter's walking around. I think last week at SNL I preached from Luke 9, where the question was asked, who was the greatest? The disciples were comparing notes. They wanted to know who among them was the greatest. A dorky question asked, right? But Peter must be sitting in the back going, well, I am Peter, and I am the rock on which the church is going to be built. So he must have been feeling pretty good about himself. And he probably felt like he had a leg up as the greatest disciple of all time. But he had this promise that we see in Matthew 16. I kind of gave away the plot here, but at the Last Supper, the last time that Jesus was going to be with the disciples, Jesus started to reveal the picture more fully. He says, I'm going, guys. They're coming for me, and they're going to kill me. And the disciples were like, no, that's not going to happen. You're Jesus. You've done nothing wrong. They're thinking back to his triumphal entry into Jerusalem, where everybody's just so excited that he's there. That's not going to happen. We're all for you. And Jesus said, you know what? Unfortunately, guys, I don't know how to break this to you, but you're all going to wimp out. You're all going to fall away. And this is where Peter steps up as the rock. He said, come on, Jesus. I got your back. I would die for you. Nothing is going to happen to you. I would die before anything was allowed to happen to you. And Jesus said to Peter, he says, not only are you not going to die for me, he says, but before the rooster crows tomorrow morning, you're going to deny me, flat out deny you even know me 3 times. And Peter, obviously incredulous, he's the rock on which the church is going to be built. He can't believe that Jesus would say, it's got to be a huge blow to his confidence. But sure enough, in the night, the soldiers come. I can't even think of the disciple's name. Judas. I want to say Barnabas. Barnabas, thank you. Good preaching, Buzza. Judas, thank you. Judas leads the Roman soldiers and shows them who Jesus is, and they capture him. And they take him, and the trial begins. And so in the night, as the kind of the word is spreading, and people are realizing that this one who's been stirring everybody up, he has been captured. And they're starting to kind of look around, it's like, well, what about those ones who are with him? And they see Peter. They say, Peter, I know you. You were one of the ones that was with him. You were one of his closest friends. Sure enough, Peter says, no, I don't know what you're talking about. He's freaking out. He doesn't know what's going on. His buddy's been taken to jail, and now people are figuring him to be one of his friends. No, I don't even know him. And as you know the story, 2 more times, people identify him as one of Jesus' guys. He was known as a Jesus follower, but he denied him flat out. And in the most sad bit of poetry, right after the 3rd time he denies Jesus, it's described as the rooster crowing, to signify that the morning's happened. And that prophetic word spoken over Peter came true, that he denied Jesus 3 times. Now, I don't know if you've ever had a friend, like a really, really close friend, or if you've ever been a really, really close friend. And maybe there's been some significant moment in either yours or your friend's life. And at the moment where you should be the strongest and the most loyal, you flake out the most ultimately. You know what? When I think of Peter in this moment, I think of a fighter. I may have shared this with you. My guilty pleasure is watching UFC. Ken and I have talked about in the past. I love I love the conflict and the battle of UFC fighting. Shauna, you know all about this. She's a UFC fighter too. I don't know, not UFC MMA, but I love watching these fights. I love the science. I love listening to the commentator say what's going to happen next, and sure enough, that one move set up another move, and he got him in this one hole. It's just, to me, it's brilliant. It's barbaric. It's fantastic. But I think about this UFC fighter, we'll call him Peter, who has been proclaimed the next champion of the world. Everybody's talking about him. This is the #1 contender for the title. And usually for a UFC fight, it'll be months in advance. They will announce who's going to fight, what the date is, then they've got to make weight and then show up and everything gets worked out. And imagine the press, he does all these interviews talking about how he's the Rock and how how he's the Rock and how the church is going to be built on him. He's got all this swagger, talking smack about this loser he's going to be fighting. And everything builds up and builds up and builds up to the day. He's got his entrance music all planned. And the one guy, the champion, comes in. He's ready. He's all sweaty, lathered up, and ready to go. Lathered up? I don't know what kind of fight this is going to be. But, and then then Peter comes in. He's got his entrance music, his posse, that's not the right word, his entourage around him, and they're all excited. People are going crazy for Peter. This is his moment to show the world the fighter that he is. And is it Bruce Buffer? Bruce Buffer, the guy who, "Hey now, let's get ready to roll." He does his whole speech, announces everybody. The referee brings to the middle and gives all the rules, and they stare at each other, make their mean faces, and they go to their corners. And then ding ding, it's about to start. And Peter is like, "Oh, no," and leaves the octagon, and he doesn't even throw a punch. He absolutely, all this build up to this moment of glory, and he just bails. He freaks out, he whips out. It is the ultimate picture of failure, I think we see in the Bible. And when I said that to myself, I was like, okay, well, no, King David, that was pretty bad. That was pretty bad. But for Peter to betray his best friend in the world, and it really was the one thing he could give to Jesus was loyalty. In the ultimate moment where Jesus, I don't know if he needed him, but this was his chance to prove his loyalty, he failed. He failed in the most epic way imaginable. So now can you imagine, for Peter, he has given his life to Jesus. He walked away from everything he knew. He was all in on Jesus. And Jesus had given him hope. He said, "You know what? I'm changing your life. You're not Simon anymore. I'm changing your name. I'm changing your life. You're a new creation because of me. And I'm going to give you this promise that I'm going to build my church on you." This promise was the hope that Peter carried around. And how must Peter have felt at this moment when he denied Jesus 3 times and failed more epically than anybody's ever failed? That must have been like a balloon being burst. All of that hope flushed away. It would have been the bottom of the bottom of the bottom. I can't even imagine a worse feeling. We read that Judas, who may have one-upped Peter as far as failure, in that he betrayed him and sold him for 30 pieces of silver, Judas couldn't bear it. He killed himself. It was too much for him to bear, the shame of betraying Jesus. But Peter couldn't have been far off. To know that in his one moment where he was meant to shine, he failed, must have been the lowest of the lowest of the low. All hope for that promise must have been flushed. It must have gone. Well, as we know, Jesus was crucified on the cross, but then he rose from the dead. He defeated death. And it was a little later after Jesus rose from the dead and then ascended to heaven, he had commanded his disciples to go. Go wait. Just go and wait, and I'm going to send the Holy Spirit. And sure enough, he did. We read in Acts 4, the disciples were all just waiting and praying. They weren't just kind of sitting by the lake. They were actively waiting. If waiting could be an activity, they were doing that. They were waiting, they were praying, they were together. They were expecting Jesus to fulfill the promise of sending the Holy Spirit. And sure enough, the Holy Spirit came big time. In Acts 4, we see this rushing wind came through this upper room that they were meeting in. Tongues of fire were on top of their heads. It must have been so unusual. And then they started to speak in other tongues. And they started speaking in other tongues so actively, and that's not the word I want, but so loud and so animatedly, if that's a word, that the people outside of the building started to talk about what is going on in there. Are they drunk? That was the accusation, is that these guys, they were making no sense, babbling. And that's when Peter had the confidence to walk out. And just before he walked out, other people were like, no, I don't know. They're speaking in my language, and I'm not from here. I'm from thousands of miles away, but they're speaking my language. And somebody else is saying, no, they're speaking my language. The Holy Spirit had given them this gift of being able to speak in other tongues. They didn't know what they were saying, but God was speaking through them, giving them this gift of speaking in other tongues. And people were hearing it, and they were hearing the message in their own language. But Peter was filled with the Holy Spirit. And all of that shriveledness that came from his failure was now refilled and filled to bursting, where he stepped out and spoke on behalf of the disciples. And he shared the news about Jesus. He said, we're not drunk. It's 9 o'clock in the morning, for crying out loud. This is what's happening. He told them exactly what was happening. And you know what happened? 3,000 people made a decision to follow Jesus that day. That same decision that Simon made when Jesus said, come follow me. 3,000 people decided, we're going to follow Jesus. That was the day that Jesus' promise, prophetic promise, was fulfilled in the life of Peter. That's the day the church began. The church was built on what Peter had to say. And it wasn't about Peter. It was about the Spirit in Peter that gave him the boldness, the confidence to speak in a way that he's never spoken before. Where before he was ashamed and fearful about being associated with Jesus, now he's standing before 3,000 people who are looking at him like he's got a third eye, and he's explaining exactly what's happening in his life and what hope they can have if they follow Jesus. And 3,000 people dropped their fishing nets and followed. They decided they were going to be followers of Jesus from that point on. It's a beautiful redemption story. And we see, this isn't a biblical account, but the way the story is told. Ultimately, Peter dies the death on a cross himself. He is crucified around 64 AD. But not before he wrote 1st and 2nd Peter, not before he traveled the world, not the world, but the Mediterranean world, telling people boldly about Jesus. Ultimately, giving up his life because he was so passionate about who Jesus was. There's lots of evidence for Jesus and for the truth of his teachings. And Peter is one of those bits of evidence. People point to the fact that why would Peter be making up the story about Jesus and making it up to the point where he would die for this made-up fictional story? This is one of those examples for why the story of Jesus and all the things he did, it had to be true. Who would die for a lie? But Peter knew the truth. He was filled with the Spirit. He was filled with a boldness, knowing what the truth was, and having the courage to preach it. To me, this is the picture, the perfect picture in a person, that you are never beyond hope. At Peter's lowest of lows, he must have felt like there could be no more hope. That he had forfeited his right to hope. That he had gone too far off the plan. He had gone too far off of the path to have access to that promise that Jesus had for him. But Jesus redeems him and fills him, gives him a courage and a hope that was explosive and became shared all throughout the land. I'm going to invite the worship team to come back up here. And here's how I want to end each of these lessons. This is our reason for hope. This is something we can think about, something we can sink our teeth into. We've seen God redeem even the most hopeless. We are never beyond hope. Church, if you could believe that to be true, that no matter where you are, at your lowest of lows, that you are never beyond hope, does that make you more brave? Does that give you a confidence to pursue the plan, the path that God has for you? Knowing that you've never gone so far off the path that you can't be redeemed, that you can't still carry out that hope, that plan for hope that God has for you. I hope it does. It does for me. I'm filled with hope, knowing that I am never beyond hope. Here's what we're going to do. Actually, ushers, I'm going to call you forward as well. As we sing this first song, the ushers are going to pass, today's Communion Sunday, the ushers are going to pass you a cup and a cracker. If you wouldn't mind just holding on to those, what we'll do is we're going to sing together as those things get passed. And then at the end of the song, I'm going to come up and teach through communion. And we're going to share that together.